Hello to the class of 2020. Hello and thank you to our teachers, to our families, to our loved ones who helped us reach this point today. This is not the speech I dreamed of giving, and I know this is not the ceremony you dreamed of having. Right now, the world around us is distressing. I'd like to take a moment to recognize our healthcare workers, essential workers, and anyone who has sacrificed or lost in the past 2 months. You would not imagine the number of times I have rewritten this speech. I was so prepared to give you a speech about any number of graduation cliches. The lessons I've learned in high school, the value in making mistakes, the importance of knowing your self-worth. These are all valuable things to talk about, of course, which is why I bring them up briefly. But the truth is, I was determined to give my class a break from COVID, from the mess of the world around us right now, to attempt to shelter us all for however many minutes I can ramble on before you hit the mute button. My reason for this desire was that all I could see in our current situation was negativity. I still feel, unsure about my future next year, scared for my family and for vulnerable people everywhere, anxious for some sense of certainty. In the past 2 months, I have cried a lot, and I certainly can't call this the happiest period of my life. I'm sure many of you can relate. And I didn't want to remember our class with a negative speech, because when I think of the class of 2020, I see us as absolutely everything but negative. We are a family of musicians, of athletes, of dramatists, hard workers, and overachievers. We exemplify strength in numbers, small numbers, and the 132 of us have never met a challenge we couldn't face, whether it be Midnight Maze, AR reading tests, or the gymnastics unit in phys ed. So you and your strength convinced me. I realized that this moment in our lives is not an obstacle that we must find some way around, but a challenge that will give us the opportunity to come out stronger. And the key to overcoming this challenge is hope. There's an old Greek myth that I think articulates this well. In the myth of Sisyphus, Sisyphus is condemned to push a boulder up a tall mountain forever, only to have the rock roll right back down as soon as he gets to the top. I used to feel like Sisyphus, not just in the past year. I've always set high expectations for myself, getting an A on a paper, joining X or Y club, taking that hard class. And that was fine. We should all try to challenge ourselves. My problem was that as soon as I succeeded in something, as soon as I got that A or enrolled in that class, I would move the goalposts, push them another 10 yards away from myself. And I'd find that I was never truly happy with what I had accomplished. I'd watch all my hard work roll down the hill. Now I was determined to get an even higher grade, to become president of the club. And over the past 2 months, I have felt like Sisyphus too. As soon as I began social distancing and focusing on safety, that was no longer enough for me. Now, bags needed to be disinfected, gloves needed to be worn, masks needed to be constantly cleaned. Unlike Sisyphus, no God needed to punish me. I have pushed my own boulder down the hill just so that I can roll it back up again. To my friends, please don't push your rock back down the hill. Recognize that you have done enough, and if you feel inspired to work harder, simply find a taller mountain. But back to Sisyphus and his boulder. See, I had always pitied Sisyphus and his never-ending chore. But then I came upon the work of a famous French philosopher, Albert Camus, and I realized that actually I have been imagining Sisyphus incorrectly. Camus argues that rather than living his life in vain stuck at a terribly boring task, Sisyphus is a hero who refuses to give up. He realizes that his life will be made up of the mundane, and then he makes the choice to keep living and to embrace all the burdens that may come with it. It was easy for Sisyphus to continue to roll his boulder back up the hill when he didn't have to think about it, just as it is easy for a fish to ignore the water all around him, or for us to ignore the constant inconveniences of life. But later in the myth, he is faced with the reality of his situation and its infinite length. Still, he finds hope. He sees beauty in his situation and he keeps going. Sisyphus teaches us a lesson. It is when we come face to face with something life-altering, with true hardship, with the bleakness many of us may be feeling right now, that we get to recognize the absurdity of life, and we get to choose life, and we get the chance to live rather than simply exist. So what does living truly mean? Now that we all have the chance, I'd argue the obligation, to go out and pave new paths for ourselves in the world. How can we assure that we are living to our fullest capacity? How do we live meaningfully? Camus argues that what makes life meaningful are other human beings. I agree. So thank you all for giving me a wonderful group of human beings to make my life meaningful for the past 13 years. This question about how to be meaningful is a question I've also been asking myself the past few weeks as I have stared into my future and questioned my ability to make an impact on the world. But we must realize that meaningfulness does not come from a degree, a salary, or the societal judgment of our worth. I think Wordsworth put it best when he wrote that the best parts of a person's life are made up of the little, nameless, unremembered acts of kindness and of love. A meaningful life arises from the small things that we do for the people that we love, the tiny acts of self-love that we engage in when we read our favorite book for the 43rd time or dance it out in our rooms. The beauty in life that we now have the chance to appreciate does not depend on national acclaim or life-changing experiences. Though trust me, the Lewisburg class of 2020 will certainly have plenty of those. The tiny, almost imperceptible if you're not focusing enough, true meaning of life is much harder to notice. To detect it requires attributes that the world may be lacking in right now. Kindness, curiosity, and the ability and willingness to think for oneself. Luckily for me, and for all of you, I think we have done a wonderful job teaching ourselves how to be kind, how to be curious, and how to locate goodness in the world. To my classmates, I leave you with this. The events of this spring have assured that the world is an open book full of possibilities for our futures. We are the generation that will get to shape scientific, political, and creative fields like no generation before us. The unknown can be terrifying, but now is our time to race into it and create a world that we can be proud of. And while our accomplishments will undoubtedly be remarkable, please don't be scared to embrace the day-to-day joy of life. And I realize that I have tried to share the importance of finding beauty in the work itself, but know that you are still allowed to bask in your successes. When you push your boulder up to the top of the hill, pause your work for a second and enjoy the view from the peak. The beauty of the landscape below is a reflection of your hard work, and you have earned it. Thank you.